I'm interested to learn a little bit more about assigning the interview team and roles within the interview team. What's the process from a TA perspective of working with the hiring manager to decide who should be in the interviews and what roles they should be playing?
Fundamentally, the TA should be asking that question straight up. Who do you want to be interviewing? Ideally, really well-developed orgs have got what they know as interview pools. So within each of the functions, you're going to have your allocated interviewers. You may well have some that will dovetail extremely well into leadership. So if you're normally like a leadership or a C-suite or a head of department or director, normally you will be much more tasked with assessing leadership quality skills. You may well get some people with data, etc. More holistically, you'll have people assigned across the space. So you want to get to a space, ideally, where you have trained interviewers. There are your interview pool that you can assess and pick and choose the relevant ones. If, however, like most companies, you don't have your interview pools, you don't know what you're doing, what you want to do is start getting ahead of that. So now is the time, if you are starting to build out that, to really start thinking with the hiring manager, who are the best people that you need to be putting that through? And that doesn't necessarily mean they are your top performers, doesn't necessarily mean they're best of your best or whatever, but it is people that are really good at assessing and picking up how to develop potentially people. So in essence, this is probably your future leaders platform. You can leverage that as that. What you want to be doing then as a recruiter is the check and balance. So for example, if you went to a hiring manager and said, okay, who do you want in this interview panel? If they start going, right, I want 35 people to interview the candidate, you don't just go, yeah, great, fine. You need to be pushing back saying, hang on a minute, that's going to be a really long drawn-out process. You need to start leveraging the data. So you can leverage, for example, people analytics from Google team, pointing out that actually any interviews post for interviews has zero impact on the actual outcome of hiring. So you start to leverage some data points into it. And so number one is push back on the number of people in it. Then as you actually start looking at it, if they start going, okay, so I want Tom, Dave, Sam, and Harry to interview. Okay, great. What do you want them to do? Like, what are they going to be assessing? Who do you want to do what? You also then want to also start asking questions, because if all of those, for example, were male, is that really a diverse interview panel? You want to start be challenging that as well. So you want to ask, is your interview panel and your interviewers diverse? So as TA, we should be partnering should be in a position where we're comfortable to push back, to challenge and say, hey, hang on a minute, we don't have a diverse panel. The reason we should be having diverse panels is actually it does show, and data shows, that by having a diverse panel, not only do you reduce biases in your interview outcomes and run fairer interview processes, you can actually hire better, more diverse candidates. So diverse candidates actually come through. So your next step then is looking at what areas and questions do you want them to look at. So this probably links into your intake meeting. So within that, you should be having a list of skill sets or behaviors or what competencies that you want your interview team to assess. You want to start now mirroring that up. For example, if you had Dave come in to interview with candidate, if you want to be making sure that he has that ability or a skill set or an understanding of that kind of relevant competency, you can get away with it. It doesn't necessarily have to be, for example, if you're looking at like data, you don't need to bring in a data analytics engineer. It's just somebody that can actually understand that and apply it to their thinking and knows what good looks like. Yes, you can train people to understand it from the questions and the scorecards, but sometimes it can be really good in the early days of having good people who know how to assess. So those are probably some of the key tips for people that are really, really early stages. And then what you can start to do is, as you start having those interviews, start running their interview processes, that now becomes your pool. So now you automatically have your 4, 5, or maybe 8 interviewers. You can now actually start using them to train other people across your organization in how to interview and how to interview significantly better to get the right results.